All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great start to your week. A wild night in the NBA last night. All sorts of weird games. Houston loses on the road in Utah, a game where they couldn't stop fouling down the stretch as they had this bizarre stretch where they committed, I think, 5 fouls on one single possession. The Dallas Mavericks win their second consecutive game going on the road into Denver. Ryan Nembhard has a massive night. Cooper Flagg playing 2 of his best games as a young pro. Anthony Davis monster night. Lots of weird stuff, but I'm going to be zooming in on Suns Lakers from last night. We haven't done a deep dive on the Suns in a while, and I really want to dig into why they've been so much better than we even expected. I thought the Suns would be feisty this year. Kind of looked at them as a team that would be a pain in the ass to play on any given night, but now they're looking like a bona fide playoff team, and that is coming down to a handful of pieces with internal improvement. The development of Mark Williams into a foundational defensive center. Dillon Brooks blowing up into like a legitimate scorer in this league. Collin Gillespie flashing a little bit of that Austin Reaves-esque development trajectory as a role player guard into a little bit more and a little bit more each time we see him. I want to do a deep dive into the Suns. After that, I will talk about, again, this happens. It's December. You lose a bad game, or you lose a game like this where you look bad if you're the Lakers. But I do think that there's a disturbing trend with them getting punked by some of these bigger physical, athletic perimeter teams. And I want to talk about what that specifically means for the Lakers and their short-term and long-term goals as currently constructed. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing incredible work on our social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So make sure you guys follow us there for more content throughout the season. And then last but not least, if you guys want to get mailbag questions into our mailbags, you can drop them in our full episodes on YouTube in the comments, right? Mailbag with a colon, write your question. That helps me sort through them as I'm looking through. And we will have our next mailbag coming up on this Friday. All right, let's talk some basketball. So, I want to take the game itself and I want to focus more on some of the big picture stuff for both of these teams. Obviously, the game itself, it's a combination of a incredibly impressive performance by the Phoenix Suns and an incredibly disappointing performance by the Los Angeles Lakers. They led by as much as 25 in this game. Phoenix did. And there's a tendency on nights like last night just to chalk things up to December basketball, right? Like nights like last night happen a lot in the NBA, where it's like Houston losing in Utah is a classic example. Houston's been one of the most impressive teams in the league to start this season, and they could not stop making mistakes down the stretch against the Jazz. Denver losing to Dallas. Denver has a few kind of bizarre bad losses as of late. Am I about to panic about the Lakers because they looked bad on a Monday in December to drop to 15-5? No, of course not. We're not going to get melodramatic today. But I do think there is plenty to learn from that game. First of all, Phoenix is a really good basketball team. And they have some very exciting developments in terms of internal improvement that have made them even more dangerous than I thought they would be before the season. And then on the Lakers front, Phoenix presented some physical challenges and a game plan that caused the Lakers to spiral in a way that we've seen before. Against Oklahoma City back in November, or against Minnesota back in the playoffs last year in the first round. I think those are real demons that the Lakers will have to conquer if they want to reach their goals. We're going to get to the Lakers later, though. We haven't done a deep dive on the Suns in a while, so I want to deep dive in on Phoenix. And I want to start with their defense. There are things with the Suns this season that I expected, but there have also been some things that I've been genuinely surprised by. I expected them to be a good defense. It just made sense structurally. You have a guy like Ryan Dunn heading into his second year who's very dynamic and versatile on the perimeter as a defender. He's got strength. He's got speed. He competes. He's got a good motor. Lots of really exciting stuff there. You go into his second season. You expect him to experience a good amount of improvement on that end of the floor. And then you turn Kevin Durant into Dillon Brooks. That's obviously a talent downgrade, right? But Dillon Brooks is legitimately one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA. And similar to Ryan Dunn, he can guard a pretty wide range of players. So you add a second guy in that Ryan Dunn ilk of this big, physical, awesome perimeter defender when this team was lacking that type of player last year. But then you look down the roster and everyone else on the perimeter is a plus. Devin Booker was literally the primary point of attack guy on many nights for Team USA a couple of summers ago. Royce O'Neal is a solid perimeter defender. Jordan Goodwin is a solid perimeter defender. Collin Gillespie and Grayson Allen, those are guys who compete. They're physical. They're usually in the right spot. They have good game plan discipline. And they have some defensive talent at the center position. Some guys who can switch a little bit, plenty of foot speed, and some real length in the form of guys like Mark Williams and Kaman Malawach, right? That was what I saw coming into the season, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good defense. But then I watched them come out and physically punch the Lakers in the mouth in their first preseason game. You guys remember that? We covered that preseason game. And I was like, okay, not only do they have the pieces on paper, but they also look clearly bought in. This is going to be a pain in the ass to deal with on any given night in the NBA. I specifically predicted before the season that they'd be the type of team who would beat the really good Western Conference teams on any given night where they don't bring the appropriate effort and focus. In other words, I thought they'd be the royal pain in the ass type of team in the West playoff picture. But I figured they'd be something like 37-45. Some really fun wins against good teams, some fun nights for the fans, but no real threat. Like no real any sort of like consistent success that's going to be something people have to account for in the playoff picture. Forget all of that. They look like a legitimate playoff team. Like at this point, they look pretty well entrenched as a top 8 seed in the West. It's still early. Dudes could get hurt. Devin Booker groin injury last night. Things could fall apart. But to me, they look a lot more like a 45-37 team than a 37-45 team. So the question is why? Why is it that the Suns, on a year where they lose Bradley Beal and they trade Kevin Durant, that they suddenly are looking like a team that could very well be better than they were last year? And there's two reasons for that. One is the internal development on offense, which we'll get to later on. Guys like Collin Gillespie, guys like Dillon Brooks. We'll get to that later. The second piece of it, though, is the internal development on defense, specifically with Mark Williams as a drop coverage big. I remember when the Lakers made that ill-fated Dalton Connect for Mark Williams trade last year, shortly before the deadline. I did a pretty extensive scout on Mark Williams, and I thought he looked bad on defense. He obviously had the tools. He's got good mobility. He's got a ridiculous wingspan for the position, but his instincts were rough. He made a ton of mistakes. He'd, try to block shots he had no business blocking and give up offensive rebounds, or he'd aggressively show and help and give an easy drop off for a dunk. He just looked like a guy that really struggled with the basic decision-making process of rim protection, of like when to go for the shot versus when to stay home. Just some basic fundamentals. He looked like he was a real mistake maker. So I viewed him as an offensive weapon, a guy that could help Luka on the roll as a vertical spacer, a guy who's a good offensive rebounder, always like underrated as a guy who could like grab offensive rebounds and make kick out passes to 3-point shooters, a lot more connective passing, short roll passing ability than you'd think. I'm like, oh, this will be a good offensive weapon for Luka, but this guy can't guard, and that's going to be an issue. And there were the health concerns, right? Phoenix has turned him into a legitimate defensive anchor, which I did not see coming. This is a credit to Brian Gregory. He made a big bet on just how incompetent Charlotte was in terms of the talent they had on the floor and the way they were using him. And I think that Brian Gregory just looked at that and was like, Charlotte's at least partially responsible for Mark not being a good defender. We can turn him around. And then secondly, you have to credit Jordan Ott for creating an achievable defensive role for him with the talent they had available. We often refer to drop coverage on the show as a bracket, okay? Why is it a bracket? Because there's two sides to the coverage. There's the big, who's keeping the ball handler and the big in front in a deep drop, or at least keeping the ball handler in front in a high drop, right? And then there's the top part of the bracket, which is the on-ball defender getting over the top of the screen, staying attached, back pressuring, getting a rear view contest. And one of the things that's kind of difficult with evaluating bigs and drop coverage, and this is one of the things I underrated when I was scouting Mark Williams' film in Charlotte, is the job of the drop coverage big is substantially harder when the point of attack defense isn't good. When the top part of the bracket isn't good, and that ball handler is easily getting over the top of the screen, and he has lots of separation from his defender, and he's super comfortable operating in the mid-range, he can manipulate the drop coverage big easier. Because that drop coverage big also has a responsibility to offer contest on those mid-range shots. There's a little dance you do. You're backpedaling, you're stunting and contesting at the guard while making sure you keep that roll man in front of you, right? And if that guy's coming free and clear off the screen, he's going to engage you easier. It's going to look more like a traditional 2-on-1 where like you jump to the guard and it's a lob dunk, or you stay back and that dude's getting easy twos or going right at you at the rim, right? If the guy on the top part of the bracket isn't doing his job, it makes it really difficult. But when you have Ryan Dunn, when you have Dillon Brooks, and those dudes are getting up into the ball, making dudes uncomfortable from the opening tip, staying attached over the top of screens, basically funneling you into the paint, the ball handler, making it so that that dude doesn't have a lot of comfort in the mid-range, but rather is just driving into your length, it suddenly becomes a very tenable dynamic for a talented drop coverage big. That specific dynamic, the ability of Dunn and Brooks to pressure the ball and stay attached from behind while Mark Williams' giant wingspan is swallowing everything up at the basket as they're getting funneled in, is literally what broke the Lakers' offense last night. And I want to give Jordan Ott some more credit here because this did not go well early in the game. His idea was, we're going to run a traditional drop coverage and we're going to guard that action 2-on-2, meaning Dunn or Brooks is going to chase, Mark Williams is going to be there in the drop. The other three dudes, they might stunt and recover, a little bit of like opportunistic playmaking, but for the most part, those dudes are going to stay home. That leaves the coverage 2-on-2. That is going to dictate the flow of the game more towards Luka Doncic scoring the basketball. We talked about this a lot over the course of the last couple of games with the Lakers. I talked about it yesterday in our Power Rankings show. Against the Pelicans, Luka comes out and he's facing a lot of single coverage and 2-on-2 and pick and roll. So he's looking to score. And he scores. And then suddenly by the middle of the second quarter, we're anybody but Luka, please. We're blitzing the hell out of this dude. Give up the basketball, right? Versus the Dallas game where Jason Kidd comes out and he's doubling Luka Doncic like from the opening tip. And it's a little bit different dynamic. It's dictating Luka more towards passing the basketball, right? So Jordan Ott's game plan last night, he wants to guard these pick and rolls 2-on-2. He's willing to live with Luka as a scorer. And Luka scores. Yet another 20-point first quarter, something he's been doing a lot more often as of late. Now, the overreaction would be, shit, Luka torched us. Let's adjust. Let's start blitzing. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to be 4-on-3s for LeBron and Austin off the ball, and it's going to cause all sorts of problems on the backside of your defense. There was no overreaction from Jordan Ott. He stuck with the game plan. And even though Luka was awesome in the first quarter, he started to fall apart as the game went along and really, really started to turn the basketball over. They turned Luka over 9 times yesterday. How do those turnovers happen? Yes, there were some kind of unforced ones where, Luka's forcing ridiculous up the court passes to covered LeBron overthrowing Rui, running running up the lane line, right? Like there were some unforced errors, but most of those were a product of the fact that when Luka started to work against the 2-on-2, like he turned one over to Bouye in the right corner, and it's like, Bouye's staying home. When those guys are home, they're in the passing lanes. Luka specifically mentioned in the post-game presser that he was kind of confused by the coverage. He got confused because of the fact that he was getting defended 2-on-2, and it felt like he was in a crowd because Mark Williams is there and the dude's draped on his backside in back pressure, and they're kind of stunting and recovering, but they're actually home. He was confused because it felt like he was in a crowd when the action was actually only getting guarded 2-on-2. That's the dynamic that when you have the right kind of talent, when you have the types of on-ball players that Phoenix has and the drop coverage big that Mark Williams is in terms of his length around the basket, you can make things feel congested when they actually aren't. And that's what it can start turning into, those turnovers. And then JJ Redick mentioned this after the game, but there were a couple times where Luka got deep penetration and was like in around the basket, and there were swarms, but he had opportunities to throw kick-out passes, but he couldn't see them. And he couldn't see them because Mark Williams' long-ass arms are going like this. And JJ mentioned that after the game. Mark Williams and his length caused a problem for Luka getting the ball through those coverages. And I just think a big thing that we underrated, and myself included, that we underrated about this Phoenix Suns defense is they've turned Mark Williams into a legitimate defensive anchor drop coverage big. And they were able to successfully guard the Lakers in pick and roll 2-on-2 most of the night last night without giving up too much. And by the way, the Suns this season are 9 points per 100 possessions better on defense with Mark Williams on the floor versus off. And I do think it's worth mentioning beyond the two-man game. So beyond the Dunn and Williams or Brooks and Williams two-man defensive sequences against pick and roll, I thought the Suns as a team were incredibly sharp with their help and recover decisions and their rotations to shooters. A lot of sequences where guys made opportunistic digs but then got back out, or the Lakers did manage to not turn the basketball over and kick out to somebody, but there was a great closeout that would chase a Gabe Vincent off the line, or chase a Maxi Kleber off the line, or chase a Dalton Connect off the line. A lot of really good closeouts. I just thought they played a very good defensive game last night, Phoenix. That was the number one half-court offense in the entire NBA in the Lakers that the Suns faced last night. They held them to a 99 offensive rating in the half court, which is about 7 points per 100 possessions below their season average. And that's obviously impressive in and of itself, but the real damage was done on the margins. They forced 22 turnovers. And again, some of them were unforced, but many of them were like pokeaways by their on-ball guys. You know, Ryan Dunn poking the ball away from a Luka or Austin, or like Mark Williams, like we talked about, forcing turnovers on kickouts with his length around the rim. I think Phoenix deserves a ton of credit for the job they did disrupting a great Lakers offense. Those turnovers allowed them to get out in transition, and they bludgeoned them in transition. The Suns scored 32 points off of Lakers turnovers in this game. They outscored the Lakers 28-2 on the fast break. That's basically the difference in the game. So in other words, the Suns defended so well that they played the Lakers into a below average offensive game, and they forced a ton of turnovers, which fed their transition attack where they dominated. And again, I just want to credit every one of the Suns, like Brian Gregory for the moves he made this summer to balance out the roster, the bet he made on Mark Williams, Jordan Knott for building a scheme that matches the talent really well, and from day one of this season, getting a level of buy-in from this roster that they didn't have in years past. And the guys in that locker room have been playing great defense. They just deserve a lot of credit. Now let's move to the offensive end. Dillon Brooks, man. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. The Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app is the only legal sportsbook for whenever you're in Florida, and it's also live in Arizona, Ohio, New Jersey, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Illinois, and Colorado. Coming soon to more states, too. Sign up today, and you could score $150 in bonus bets. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you get not only your winnings, but also $150 in extra bonus bets. Want to see what everyone else is betting on tonight? Top picks or parlays across any sport? The Hard Rock Bet app literally shows you. It's another reason to download the app, just for the info. Tap Discover, and you can see trending picks and parlays at any time. Hard Rock Bet offers new promos daily, plus big legendary rewards drops every Thursday, like gifts under the tree. So whenever you're listening, just open up the app and check out what you got waiting for you. Download the Hard Rock Bet app and make your first deposit. What a show he put on last night. I've had a pretty consistent opinion about Dillon Brooks over the years. I think he's an awesome player. He's one of the best and most versatile perimeter defenders in the league. He's an apex competitor who brings it every single night. He was absolutely not to blame for what happened in Memphis, even though he got scapegoated for it. And that's been revealed in a big way, by the way, as Memphis has basically fallen apart since then. I had two beefs with Dillon Brooks while he was in Memphis. One was the dirty plays. I just have absolutely zero respect for a player who tries to hurt people. And he had like 3 or 4 of these types of plays in his career that were completely indefensible, like tackling Gary Payton in a playoff game and breaking his elbow. Or he had this one where he like deliberately tried to barrel roll on the ground up into Donovan Mitchell's knees. Like there's no reason you would do that unless you were trying to hurt the guy. It was completely unbecoming of a player of his caliber, completely unacceptable behavior in the NBA. To Dillon's credit, though, it's been a few years since I've seen something like that, so maybe he finally grew out of it. But that was one thing that I couldn't stand when he was in Memphis. The second piece of it was I just didn't understand his shot selection. And that's now, interestingly enough, turned into something that's in his favor. But in Memphis, Dillon had a shot diet that in many ways mimicked that of an all-star. Over his 4 final seasons in Memphis, he averaged 15 shot attempts per game. He had a season in 2022 where he took 16 and a half shots per game. And you know, what was kind of fascinating is they didn't look like terrible shots. Like he had good footwork, like legit scoring footwork. He'd get good separation with step back moves or turnarounds over both shoulders or things out of different dribble combinations. Now, in many cases, defenders were kind of like, go ahead, dude, take that shot, because he wasn't making them. But the footwork in the process, it looked like a dude who could score the basketball. Now, during that phase, when he was in Memphis, it was something that was hurting his impact on winning. He would cost his team a half dozen possessions every game, taking a shot he had no business taking. And it would undercut some of the success he was having elsewhere on the floor as a defender and as an antagonist. But then he goes to Houston. And Ime Udoka basically gets him to stop taking those tougher shots, especially like those pull-up mid-range twos. And suddenly his shot diet skews way more heavily towards like that typical 3-and-D archetype. Now, he still did it every once in a while, but for the most part, he trimmed the fat out of his game, and he literally became one of the very best role players in the entire NBA, and he was a big part of that turnaround in Houston. His efficiency skyrocketed, basically became one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, just an awesome player who looked very worth the contract that he ended up signing. I think it was like 4 years, $80 million or whatever it was at that point in time. It was for that reason that I actually really liked this trade for Phoenix. I thought turning Kevin Durant into Dillon Brooks was obviously a talent downgrade, but it was the perfect roster balancing trade, especially with an aging Kevin Durant. And it's worth mentioning that we still haven't even seen Jalen Green yet. 2 games before he re-injured the hamstring, but we may end up seeing even more returns out of that deal. However, I don't think any of us could have seen this type of offensive explosion from Dillon, especially after essentially trimming that from his game in Houston. All of those good-looking ISO moves from his time in Memphis, the ones he was clanking left and right, now they're going in. Last night was not an outlier performance. That was his 9th 20-plus point game of the season. That was his 6th 25-plus point game of the season. It was his 3rd 30-point game. He's averaging, Dillon Brooks, averaging 25 points per game over his last 10 games. He's shooting 61% from 2-point range during that span. He's been deadly accurate on pull-ups, 34 for 71 on pull-up twos this year, 6 for 12 on floaters. That's just under 50% on pretty high volume in the mid-range. He's 66% at the rim. We didn't see too much of this last night, but he's bullying dudes like to the basket for layups on a lot of his drives. Really, the only thing he's not shooting well this year is the three, which is strange because he shot it pretty well in Houston. So maybe it'll come around as the season goes along. He certainly hit a few last night. And it's making him into a legitimate offensive weapon in this league. Dillon has run 69 post-ups and ISOs, so 69 one-on-ones. He's generated 77 points, including passes. That's 1.12 points per possession. That's insanely good for one-on-ones. I'm pretty good volume. He's also been a good ball screen player. He's hit 6 of his 9 pull-up threes in pick and roll. He's shooting 63% on twos in pick and roll. He's run 78 of them. He's got 1.23 points per possession, including passes. That's incredible. And the main thing I want to emphasize here is just how much work Dillon has done behind the scenes to continue to refine this part of his game. He has actually some decent natural talent as a scorer. I always talk about scoring as a 3-part skill. You have to have this audacious personality. Like, you have to be confident enough to think, I don't need to score on open shots or drive closeouts. Like, I can get a bucket on this dude one-on-one. There is an audacious confidence piece to it. Then there's a creativity piece to it. There's like a dance, a counter move, like a move, counter move dance to scoring. And there's a natural instinct element to it that's like a creativity. And some dudes just don't have that. Some dudes are just too robotic. They struggle with that natural dance of move, counter move. And then the third piece of it is you have to have the touch to actually make shots. Dillon always had those first two pieces. We all know damn well Dillon has the audaciousness. He has the confidence. That kind of stuff always came naturally to Dillon. Then there's the creativity piece. Like we talked about in Memphis, he had the natural kind of like move, counter move dance. He would make these really nice one-on-one moves and just miss the shot. The audaciousness and the creativity, those are natural talents for Dillon. What has happened is he worked his ass off behind the scenes to turn himself into a real shot maker. Not just a shooter, but a maker. And the thousands and thousands of reps that must have taken behind the scenes. And in a really fascinating way, considering it seemed like he had basically abandoned that to a certain extent in Houston. And now he's a real matchup problem because he's got size. He's basically that typical mismatch attacking forward now that it's like you put a small on him, he's just going to pick him apart. He picked apart the Lakers guards last night. And so this development, being the legitimate defensive perimeter weapon that he is, one of the very best perimeter defenders in the league, a guy that knows how to play advantage basketball like he learned in Houston on the offensive end, but now you're adding this like bona fide mismatch attacking forward scoring piece. And he went into Los Angeles and outplayed Luka Doncic for a night. That's the level that he's capable of reaching right now. That's how much he's raised his ceiling from where he was in recent years. And it's just a truly remarkable development, an internal improvement for Phoenix that is making them a better basketball team. And then there's Collin Gillespie. In a lot of ways, his rise has kind of reminded me a little bit of Austin Reaves. And I'm not trying to make the like, oh, small white guard comparison there. It's more just the guy who kind of finds a role on a imbalanced roster just simply because he's a good, well-rounded basketball player. Austin kind of found his footing in the early part of his career on a Lakers team that had shipped out all their good role players in pursuit of Russell Westbrook. And they were in desperate need of a dude who just knew how to play. Like a guy who could do all the little things like scrap for loose balls and be in the right place in terms of defensive discipline and attention to detail in the game plan, and like a guy who could compete on the ball defensively and at least scrap and guard. But like on the other end, that could like just make smart reads and knock down an open catch and shoot three and drive a closeout. And like, oh, it's the end of a clock and you need him to run a quick ball screen. He could run a quick ball screen. That's how Austin found his initial role with the Lakers. And then he blossomed over time into a more and more useful on-ball player. Collin Gillespie's track with Phoenix has actually been very similar. Toward like last season on a Suns team that was woefully imbalanced, too much top-end ball handling, not enough well-rounded, good role player basketball players, Collin finds a role. We talked about this last year, just like not getting back cut as often or not missing box outs as often as guys like Bradley Beal would. A guy that would just pay attention to his role in the game plan, do his job, knock down an open catch and shoot three, run the occasional ball screen. Oh, you went way under or you ran into the screen. I can hit a pull-up three, or I can get downhill and make a little floater, make basic reads and drive and kicks, convert spot ups at a decent percentage. That's how Collin found his initial role with the Suns last year. And then all he's done is he's continued and taken that to the next level this season. He's shooting the absolute shit out of the basketball off the catch. This is one of the big differences between him and Austin. He's a little bit more of like a natural catch and shoot player, whereas Austin's more of a natural, like, put the ball on the floor type of scoring guard, right? But he's shooting 51% on catch and shoot threes this season, shooting well with both contests and without contests. He can drive a closeout. He can hit a shot in the mid-range. He can get all the way to the rim. He's converting spot ups at 1.37 points per possession this year. Out of 159 players to log at least 50 spot ups, that's 10th out of 159. He's been one of the best spot up players in the league this year. He's shown more and more off the dribble pop. He's hit 15 threes off the dribble in pick and roll this year. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I think that's more than he hit all season last year in pick and roll off the dribble. He's massively increased his pick and roll volume this year. Not quite as efficient as he was last year, but still just slightly above average, 51st percentile. Hit that game winner versus Minnesota, driving along the right lane line with that little floater. He's up to 13 points per game on 61% true shooting this year. So again, the comp that I'm trying to draw there with Austin Reaves is just simply the way that he managed to get his initial opportunity with the Suns just by being a well-rounded, disciplined, like fundamentally sound basketball player in every facet of the game. And then that blossoming into more opportunity this year and him capitalizing on it through his own internal improvement. So in summation on the Suns, I thought they'd be like this scrappy team that would hover just below 500, fueled by a good defense, by Devin Booker just being like a legit floor-raising offensive engine, and overall just better buy-in and better vibes with the roster shakeup. But instead, they look like a legit middle-tier playoff team in the Western Conference. And it's because Jordan Ott and those defensive wings have helped Mark Williams become a legitimate defensive anchor, which I didn't see coming, and because of the explosions offensively of guys like Dillon Brooks and Collin Gillespie. I'm sure the Suns fans are thrilled right now, and they should be. Like, I was rooting for the Lakers last night, and even though I was annoyed by how they were playing, I actually really enjoyed watching that game because the Suns played a really fun brand of basketball. I enjoyed watching the Suns kick their ass because they were playing such fun basketball. And they're not going anywhere. Barring severe injuries, that's a playoff team to me. They look like a clear top 8 in that Western Conference to me. On the Lakers front, whenever this kind of stuff happens, there's two different perspectives to take, right? There's this is just what happens in the regular season. Like, you know, the Lakers, for instance, playing a really light stretch of their schedule, building some bad habits, kind of operating at a different speed. And then Phoenix just played Oklahoma City and Denver, right? So like they've been in the trenches for about a week now. They're operating at like a higher level of competitiveness and physicality than the Lakers are. Some kind of stuff will just happen like this in the regular season. Whatever. like just move on. You're 15-5. That's one attitude to have, right? But then the other side of this is like there were some real basketball dynamics at play in this game that we've seen before from this version of this Lakers team against similar types of opponents, which at least makes it worth acknowledging as a potential vulnerability with this team. So what do the Suns do that's different than most NBA teams? They're big and physical and athletic on the perimeter. They got guys that they can put on LeBron and on Luka that make them uncomfortable, make things harder for them, and on Austin as well. They get up into you with ball pressure. They try to punk you. They try to physically dominate you. And it's worth mentioning, this is not the first time that we've seen these Lakers succumb to that type of pressure and physicality. We saw it against the Thunder about, 3 weeks ago. We saw it against the Timberwolves in the first round last year. It is a legitimate vulnerability with this team. Now, to be clear, the Lakers are absolutely capable of beating this type of team. The Lakers have responded to their first round loss to the Timberwolves by returning the favor at regular season style, but they've dominated the Timberwolves to start this season. They beat them with Luka and Austin. They beat them with just Austin in Minnesota. The Lakers last year had a couple of great games against the Thunder. Before Luka fouled out, got himself ejected, it looked like they were going to go 2-0 against the Thunder in the regular season last year. The same Thunder that's a transcendently great defense. They handled the pressure, didn't turn the basketball over, moved the ball through Oklahoma City's defense, got great shots, knocked them down. They kicked their ass in one of those two games. What's the difference? What's the difference between the 2 wins against Minnesota this year, the 1 win against Oklahoma City last year, and the impressive performance against Oklahoma City before Luka gets ejected versus the absolute thrashing they took from the Thunder this year, the absolute thrashing they took from the Suns this year, and the embarrassing performance in round 1 against the Timberwolves back in April? What's the difference between those two outcomes? It's all about their ball handlers and the way they manage the pressure. In the losses, Austin and Luka have been bad. They've turned the ball over. They've looked flustered. They've lost control of the game in transition, and they've gotten run off the floor. In the wins, they've methodically handled the pressure. They've made good reads. They've scored the ball. And they've kept control of the pace of the game, kept things in the half court, and they've looked great. So to be clear, vulnerability is not the same as a death sentence. It's just about acknowledging a weakness, being aware that it's the demon you have to conquer if you want to reach your ultimate goals. In a 7-game series, if you toast off a game or two where you turn the ball over 25 times and give up 35 points in transition, that can be a lot to overcome. I just think this is worth mentioning because when you talk about the conversation surrounding the potential trade market for the Lakers this year, like I too, like many others, believe that if the Lakers can get a legit starting caliber small forward, someone like a Herb Jones or an Andrew Wiggins, if they can pull that off, I think they become one of the legitimate contenders in the league. I think they're on the same tier with Houston and Denver as a team that is a legit upset threat against OKC if we all acknowledge that OKC is the clear number one. I think they're a trade away from that. But that's just because that sort of guy can help them on defense and help them athletically and help anchor some of their best lineups so that they have a clear 5 that they can go to at the end of games. That does nothing to alleviate this specific vulnerability against this specific type of opponent. This is a demon that Austin and Luka have to conquer for them to work together as a duo moving forward. And in the short term, for LeBron as well, as he for at least this year and maybe next year as he's part of this system. Having a Herb Jones on the floor isn't going to matter if Austin and Luka can't take care of the ball against big physical athletic perimeter defenders. You know, we talk about this concept a lot on this show, but like basketball too often is presented in absolutes. Like, oh, this team can't do that. Or this player can't do this, or this team sucks at defense, or this guy can't shoot. And The reality is all that stuff is determined night to night. Like, nobody cares if you think Lou Dort can't shoot if he's making the big threes that save his team in a big playoff game like he did a couple times last year. Nobody cares if you don't think the Denver Nuggets can play defense if they suddenly defend like a champion in 2023 on their way to hoisting the trophy. Nobody cares if you got punked by the Timberwolves in the first round. Nobody cares, like Austin Reaves, for example. Like, right now, he's viewed as a bad playoff player because of what happened against Minnesota. After 2023, you're like, oh my God, 8 20-point playoff games? This dude's a playoff riser. Like, it's all night to night. It's all, what have you done for me lately? The narrative is just the narrative. That's for guys like me to talk about. That's not the same as what happens when you throw the ball up at center court. So if you're the Lakers, it doesn't matter if you got punked by the Timberwolves in April, and you got punked by the Thunder in November, and you got punked by the Suns in December. If you turn around in April and you face one of those teams and you take care of the basketball and you handle the ball pressure and you pass through their defense and you score and knock down shots off of the attention you draw, which we know they can do because we've seen them do it to Minnesota this season. We saw them do it to Oklahoma City last season. They are capable, but they are also capable of succumbing to it. That's going to be the determining factor of this Lakers team and what they can achieve this year. Can they conquer those demons? Making that sort of trade for a Herb Jones or an Andrew Wiggins, that will bolster your talent level. That will define some of your best lineups. That will give you better roster balance. That will make you better defensively. That'll make you better on the glass. That'll make you more athletic in transition. Those things will certainly help. But whether or not they beat Oklahoma City, or whether or not they can handle a first-round matchup with a Minnesota, or a random regular season game against Phoenix, or hell, if Phoenix jumps up to 7 and the Lakers get the 2 seed and you end up facing them in the first round, if the Lakers are going to beat that sort of team, that is going to come down to their stars and them conquering the demon of being able to handle that ball pressure and not turn the basketball over. The beautiful thing about the game of basketball is you almost always get another chance to prove yourself. You live to fight another day. The Lakers will play Phoenix again on December 23rd. Go into Phoenix, take care of the basketball, play better on offense, beat those dudes. No one's going to give a damn what happened on December 1st. The Lakers will play some good teams on this road trip. Toronto's a good basketball team, another big physical athletic team that likes to run the floor in transition. They're going to present a challenge on Thursday night. That'll be another opportunity, right? Couple of weeks from now, the Lakers might get San Antonio and Oklahoma City in the in-season tournament. San Antonio, big physical perimeter team. Oklahoma City is the rematch of that destructive blowout they experienced in November. So they are going to get more chances throughout this season to try to address this. And inevitably, probably in the first round, at the very latest by the second or third round, they're going to face one of these teams that's big and physical on the perimeter that can get up in them and make their guys uncomfortable. And they're going to have to conquer that demon. That is separate from any roster concern. That is the conquering that this Lakers team needs to do in order to reach their goals. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. Again, I know I wanted to do that deep dive into Phoenix today. I know we spent like a half hour there, but like we will get to plenty of more teams throughout the rest of this week. We'll have more game reaction tomorrow. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show, and I will see you tomorrow morning.